I read this book in 26 minutes and I'm feeling really motivated because I better understand accentuation, textbooks, and myopic analysis. So let's talk about it. This is 26-minute reads with me, Mya D, and this reading vlog is kind of my accountability space because in these videos, I share with you my takeaways from my current book, which is book number 1, Culturally Responsive Teaching. This is book number 1 of my 26 to 26 challenge when I'm reading 26 minutes per day as an act of self-love, as an investment into myself, and as a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. Hoping you'll join me along in this journey by reading along and dropping some comments in that comment section so there's an actual dialogue going on. 26 minutes a day means that this is more of slow reading rather than speed reading, and that's great. So let's get into these takeaways. I read pages 133 through 178 this week, and takeaway number 1 is accentuate. Let me give you the quote that I found on page 142. There's birds outside. I don't know if you hear that, but you know, that's a part of life, and that's a part of life. That's it. So the quote: curriculum content should be seen as a tool to help students assert and accentuate their present and future powers, capabilities, attitudes, and experiences, end quote. There's a way of thinking that situates the teacher as the vessel in the class that has all of the wisdom and disseminates the information to the learners in the class. And while this method works, it also positions the student as the consumer model, only receiving information and not necessarily taking ownership of the information that they are receiving. The book offers the student as the consumer model, limits their engagement, and because of that lack of ownership, that just receiving. I'm only responsible for receiving the information. The other side of that is, or another option is the student as the co-director approach, which accentuates what the student knows or would like to know, the wisdom that they already have and their interests, allowing them to assist in the curating of their learning experience, which then allows them to take ownership of it. One of the ways that I do this is in my courses, I ask students to kind of survey the materials and then to share with me something that sparks an interest. Now, this may be something that they want to delve a little deeper into or something that's not covered in the curriculum in their learning experience that they want to be covered. So they're finding a gap, right? And they're allowing me to know what that gap is and creating a solution for that gap. Now, I only teach things that I have in-depth knowledge about. So I offer this to say, just because a student says, hey, professor, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z, doesn't mean that I'm going to do an in-depth unit of it in that semester, because I do believe in research. I do believe in sharing things that I have some understanding about. So because of that, I'm going to need to do some research before I can teach it. So in that case, I'll carve out a way for students to take initiative in learning about the thing, exploring it, and if they're okay with it, sharing the information that they found with the rest of the class. My dance history class often ends with students doing a presentation on a dance form that they studied. So when I started the assignment, there was a list of options, and that list of options has grown tremendously due in part to the students adding, hey, here's a dance form, here's a dance form, here's a dance form. And there's always space to add another dance form in. So for some of my students, they need that support. They need that study this thing. And then for other students, they know what they want to study, right? Because I don't know everything. but the students know themselves better than I know them. So this is an opportunity for them to bring themselves into the curriculum and take ownership of their learning experience. When considering the student as consumer model, the book offers these words, and I quote, "To reverse the trends, ethnically diverse students and their cultural heritages must be the sources and centers of educational programs," end quote. This is not to say that all of the educational materials should center around the student's personal interests. This is to say that including it helps students to connect with it and take ownership of their learning experiences. So us dancers understand the power of accentuating a movement and a gesture. So let's use this same practice to make the gesture of accentuating our students' interest and wisdom in our curriculum. Takeaway number 2 is textbook. On page 44, we find these words. Textbooks are often thought of to be foolproof means of guaranteeing successful teaching and learning. These practices and associated attitudes are so strongly entrenched in the minds of students that the value of courses without textbooks is sometimes suspect. Now, this sentiment is echoed in a paper by ethnomusicologist Doris Green, who discusses the challenges of creating a music and dance course that didn't have a specific textbook for the course, and how students received and resisted the information because of that lack of textbooks. Now, as someone who teaches dance practices that heavily rely on the oral tradition for the passing of information, I can understand the value of both shared stories through oral traditions and the written form. This book reminds us that, that textbooks are often written by the dominant culture and are presented by the objective truths, highlighting its subjective experiences with exclusions of some marginalized communities. That to a degree, textbooks are political documents. They're not always accurate and inclusive. That sometimes include blatant stereotypes or inadequate representations of communities and their histories. Let's take a pause. Because I feel like it's a good point to say that while I do have, I'm not sure what's going on with my voice. While I do have decades of experience as a dancer, an educator, and curriculum writer, I am not the know-all be-all for this book. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue, a space that we as educators can have a discussion and grow better in our knowledge so that we are better educators for those coming after us. As a dance educator, this is evident, this idea of the how things are written and the absence or all of the other things. This is evident in the quality of writing found in dance. It is not uncommon for descriptions to include the scenery, the title of the music, and leave little description of the actual dance movements that were performed on stage. Show-stopping, exotic, vivacious, and other cliche terms are used to describe the movement on the stage, but don't actually describe the movement on the stage. Within the dance world, there's been a call to action for practitioners of the forms to be the writers about those forms so that they are approached in a culturally sensitive way, in a way that someone reading it in the future will have a better understanding of the movements that were performed on the stage, how they connect with what was going on socially and politically at that time, or how those movements have a connection to something that happened in the past. This book discusses the imbalance between who is represented in textbooks, how communities are represented, and the way some controversial issues are lightly touched and presented in a safe kind of way. As a parent, I understand the need to present information in a way that my children can understand it. I also understand that if the depiction of the event is too sterile and absent of some very important details, then the listener is bound to repeat the problematic behavior, the unattractive behavior, because the story fails to include some very critical information. The book also discusses how some of the community's contemporary issues are overshadowed by some historical ones. So communities being presented in ways that don't include their contemporary contributions to societies, as if the community is no longer growing and developing. And all of this serves as a reminder to me as an educator to have a diverse sources in order to discuss points. So this means recordings, first-person narratives, images, and videos to get a more holistic perspective of the event or the idea. It's also a reminder that textbooks cannot be the only source of education in our classrooms, because textbooks alone are stagnant. They only offer the view of the writer, but the world is made up of many writers, many speakers, and many perspectives. Takeaway number 3 is myopic. And on page 152, we find these words, and I quote, "Omissions and myopic analysis of ethnically diverse peoples, issues, cultures, and experiences imply that they're irrelevant and even expendable." I feel like this is a great space to bring back the idea of polyspecters. Because can there actually be an accurate myopic view of an event? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I would love to hear those. I am a believer that for any event attended, there will be that many versions. There will be enough versions for everybody to attend it. So let me put that let me state that in another kind of way. If there's an event and there are 20 people at the event, there's possibly 20 different accounts of that actual event. The way that we experience and analyze an event will be based on our lived experiences and our conditioning. And that's natural, but it doesn't make it a full or accurate, right? It's the sum total of everything to get that clear picture of it. Just because something is written down doesn't make it true. And just because something is told as a story doesn't make it a folktale. It is suggested that educators develop the practice of using supplemental resources in their classes and in assisting students in analyzing and critiquing the information for accuracy. So how do you find supplemental resources for your classes? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm always thinking of where and how to do this thing. Or you could drop the name of a wonderful book. I'm always looking for a book to read, or just drop a book emoji so that I know that you're here with me. This has been 26-Minute Reads with me, Mya D. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video or found it interesting in any kind of way. Stay blessed, spread a good word, and I'll see you again next time.